Hi, everyone. My name is Hermes Huang. I am one of the co-founders and managing partners at Insight Pact. We're a facilitation and training agency based out of Bangkok, Thailand, working across Asia and the Pacific, and also with clients and partners around the world as well. Very excited to have you all here with us today to talk about the really exciting toolkit, theory and practical applications of liberating structures today. Um, it's a really great toolkit. We'll have a lot of great practical examples for you to just be able to dive in. All of the materials that we're talking about today are already available online with a really fantastic global community of practitioners. So this is absolutely a great webinar to just learn a little bit about what liberating structures are and how you can pretty much jump right into it immediately after this webinar. I'm joined today by my friend and colleague, Susan Basterfield from Greater Than, who is going to have a chance to introduce herself too. I don't want to take up too much space, but with Greater Than, they have been working with liberating structures for a long time now, and with a lot of different partners around the world. And so, again, I'll let her have a chance to explain that herself as well. But again, welcome to everyone here today, and for joining us. So, today's session, 60 minutes maximum, depending on how many questions that we have later in the hour. The conversation can go a little bit longer. We're here to be a resource for all of you to kick off this week of webinars here at Insight Pact. So really, to just get started, liberating structures has been something that I personally been using as a facilitator for the last 10 years. It's a toolkit of over 30 different tools that will help you as a manager, as a facilitator, as a designer, as a leader, really be able to shape a conversation, to open up space for people to have great alignment, great brainstorming, and great opportunities to put out there their thoughts in a variety of different contexts, whether you have a small group or a large group. It's really been something that for me, I've been using in corporate offices, on farms, and it's a set of tools that I always have to just pull out of my pocket. And that's what we want for all of you as well, to be able to start thinking about how even the simplest of ways for you to facilitate a meeting uh, can be done super quickly in the moment, and will actually it'll give you a lot of it'll help you to sort of like shape the room in a way that also allows you to present yourself as a facilitator, because they're really really easy to pull out. So, enough about me though. I want to make sure that we give a chance for Susan to introduce herself. And so, Susan um, is based in New Zealand, but it works around the world. She's done everything from alternative education to scaling businesses to working in executive coaching. I want to actually just throw it over to you and give you a chance to introduce yourself and to also answer the question around what makes liberating structures something that you use and why.
Thanks so much, Hermes. What a delight to be here. Hermes and I met person only just recently, and it was one of those instances where, gosh, I think we've sort of known each other for a long time. And so it was absolutely delight to be invited to participate in this series of skills building that Insight Pact has put together for everybody this week, and to be the first one out of the gate. As Hermes said, I've done a lot of different things. I like to say the first season of my career was pretty traditional. I mean, I started in tech back when it wasn't even called tech in the 1980s, and sort of built my career in a very traditional way, in senior leadership and big multinationals, where I could really never understand why there were so many rules about where good ideas came from, because in my experience, they could literally come from anywhere. And I think that I always tried to in my little sphere of influence, my little sashimi slice of the organization, that I could create the conditions for everybody to be able to share what they were seeing, what they were learning, keeping the customer at the middle of the conversation, but could never really understand why that wasn't valued more in big companies. And I finally left about 10 years ago, walked out of the corporate office for the last day and really became fascinated with that question, that there's some everybody in the organization, everybody in organizations see different things, right? The companies that we work in are complex. Even the person that's sitting at the top of the pyramid, the person who had the spark of foundership or is the CEO, can see a lot of things by very virtue of their position and their posture. They can't see everything. And when I came across liberating structures, it was just like, oh, I just kind of like, I felt my whole body relaxing, because liberating structures is a really predictable way to create the conditions for everybody to be able to work within a question, whether it's a question about strategy or decision making or um, planning or coaching each other. Um, the way that liberating structures have been designed uh, really are the only toolkit out there that, first of all, as a facilitator, I can truly focus on creating the conditions for what is going to emerge as per the facilitation I'm doing without having to, and they're designed so that me as a facilitator doesn't create the content. And that's what's beautiful for a group of people, that they're able to wrangle with a question or a problem or a situation or something that they want to build or design. And it comes from them. So it's not a very sophisticated way of talking to the beauty and the magic of them. And the other thing I love about liberating structures is that they will always create novelty. I've never been in a room where we've used an LS where you can predict what would happen at the beginning, and I love that about LS.
Well, Susan, thank you so much for that introduction. I actually do want to do a quick poll now to just see what everyone's familiarity with liberating structures is in the room. So you should see a poll up on your screen now. Go ahead and take a moment just to answer that question. We'll share with you the results in just a moment. I see that about 50% of us now have responded. Okay, I'm seeing that what's happening is that most people are not very familiar or not familiar at all with liberating structures, which is great. I'm glad that you're here and that you're getting this chance to get introduced to it. And I'll actually drop the liberating structures link into the chat in a moment so that if you would like to, you can follow along as we talk through as well. Like this is really a chance. We want this hour to work for you and however it works. So if part of it is just hearing me and Susan talk in the background while you explore the website, that's totally fine. Or you can hop back in when you need to. But Susan will be giving us great examples and practical scenarios for where different liberating structures and her favorite liberating structures have been used. So let's go ahead and share these results real quick so that you can also just get a pulse on the room. We want to make sure that you also know that you are not alone with wherever you are in your facilitation, your liberating structures journey. So you see here that probably about 60% of the room is not very familiar or not familiar at all. Um, and we have a few who are somewhat familiar. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing that now. Like I said, I'm going to go ahead and drop the link into the chat here, and I'm going to bring you directly to the LS menu page, and I'll share my screen as well. This is literally the menu of liberating structures. And what I want to point out actually is that some of these liberating structures, many of you said that you're not familiar. Some of these will feel familiar. They are, in some ways, an aggregation of many common tools. But what's great, so for example, with 1, 2, 4, all, every single tool has an explanation about what the liberating structure is, the different elements of how to run the liberating structure, why you would run it, tips to run it, different variations, and examples of scenarios. And then if it has materials, they'll tell you materials. But what's great is that every single one has um, a full explanation on how you can jump in and get started. I really love this example with 124 all because it's simply giving a name to a way of having conversations in large groups, which I'm sure that you have experienced at one point or another. 124 all simply signifies that when you give a group a question, something as simple as, what's the best breakfast in the world? Maybe not so simple of a question, but I just came up with that myself. Is that the idea is that you give everyone a chance to think on their own. That's the one. Then you pair people up and with the same prompt, they either come to consensus or they gather all of their thoughts together and share in twos. Then you put the two twos together to create fours. And again, depending on your prompt, you'll create consensus between the four, or you'll just continue to gather more ideas. And then finally, the all is when you gather all the people together in the room into plenary and give a chance to put out there from each of the groups what was discussed, how it was done. And it just, as a facilitator or as a manager, if you get so stuck in a conversation in a large group, sometimes it's nice to just know that you can quickly pull out this structure and say, hey, let's pause. Everyone get a chance to think for yourself. We'll pair up, we'll go into larger groups, and then we'll come back and talk as a group, just giving you that chance to facilitate the conversation so that people who may not be speaking up have a chance to think first. And we all know that everyone can benefit from a little bit of time to think and reflect on what they need. But that's just one of the liberating structures to get started with. I actually want to throw it over to Susan and actually see if knowing now where we're at in the room, if you want to maybe elaborate even a little bit more on what you see as liberating structures and maybe even talk about the kind of support that people can get from up like engaging liberating structures as a toolkit and as a community.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love 124 all. I, like you said, I have it in my back pocket and I whip it out all the time. Everything from, as long as you have, 8 or 10 people in the room. And what I love about liberating structures is you can also riff on them. Um, is, as Hermes was saying, so much of what we have been trained to do or taught to do, even either as facilitators or as team members or just people in organizations, is either the person that's facilitating or the person with the most information in the room normally tends to talk at us. And even when we are brought together, so-called for our opinion or brainstorming or whatever, the lack of a little bit of scaffolding around our conversations can mean that those same old patterns keep on emerging in the room. The person who's the quickest thinker, the person with the loudest voice, the person who is most comfortable talking in front of people normally get the lion's share of the space in the room. And liberating structures is designed to help everybody where they're at. 124 all, as Hermes was saying, it gives those people who maybe like would never be the first person to even raise their hand or speak up, to have that moment of quiet contemplation, to reflect on the question, and then just share it with one other person. It's much less intimidating. It's much easier to be vulnerable with one other person than it is with an entire room. And I really appreciate, especially as we're becoming more aware of neurodivergence and people's preferences for how they think, liberating structures really allows us to honor all of those and respect that, wow, I'm sure that some of the most brilliant people in the world would, really appreciate the time to think and reflect before they're speaking into the room. So I really, really love that. As a facilitator, I think the beautiful thing about liberating structures is you don't need to be a facilitator. As Hermes said, I hope that you leave the room today and pick up one or two of the structures that we're sharing as our favorite and just go and try them. They're expertless, right? There's no certification. Everything that's been created is in Creative Commons. In addition to the website, there's a really active and super supportive Slack group that anybody can join. So at the end of this, if you're interested, just say, I want to join the Slack, and Hermes can add you to the Slack. Um, it's a community that's super supportive. Um, it's fun, right? And it's just a great way to, yeah, just kind of step out of your box of thinking that either things are a presentation or an open discussion, because there's something better in between called LS.
Thanks so much, Susan. I'm going to take our conversation a little bit into context now. So, we know that in Asia, oftentimes we're dealing with organizations. We're working in organizations. We're supporting organizations that are very hierarchical, that are oftentimes embedded in hierarchical cultures. Um, and those end up being a part of our day-to-day conversations, whether they're in small groups or in large groups. We feel it. Um, how have you used liberating structures with enabling more collaboration or flattening structures even, let's say? I don't
Mm,
know if I can go so far as to say that, but I would love to hear, given this context that I've laid out there, where you might have used liberating structures, and is there a specific one that you've used,
mm.
and how did it go?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think one thing to say is that there is no such thing as no hierarchy. Um, and I appreciate what you're saying about some cultures, the Asian culture, where the hierarchy is very obvious, right? It's explicit. Um, in other cultures, it's still there, but it's hidden and it's sneaky, and nobody really knows what's going on and who holds the power. So, in some ways, I think that the Asian culture has a lot to, um, I guess, work with because it's out there in the open. When using liberating structures, it's because they are expertless, right? It also can be very liberating for the leader in the room to be able to use them. Because, sure, we've all known and seen and worked with leaders who want to hoard power. But actually, most leaders in the world know that they don't know it all, as I said in my opening, and would love little tools like this to be able to create more capacity and more innovation in the room. There's one liberating structure that I really love called Wise Crowds that I'll talk about in a little while, where anybody in the room can come with a particular chewy challenge that they might have at the moment. And basically the way it works, I might as well just go into it now, is that you have about a minute to state your challenge. And even if it's the CEO that's saying, like, I've got a really tricky issue with this particular partner or customer, I'm not able to connect with them in the way that I want to. I've been trying this, and I'm really frustrated and stuck. If imagine that in the room there's 10 people from all different levels in the organization, the way that Wise Crowds works is that the challenge goes out there, and then the person who's given the challenge actually turns around, and the people in the room are able to have a somewhat anonymous conversation about their advice for the person's challenge, whether it's somebody that's really early in their career or even a seasoned leader. And in this way, it can be very equalizing, should I say.
Susan, maybe we can even do a demo real quick
Mm,
just to demonstrate that.
yeah.
Maybe I can call up a few people. For a few people who I do know here, actually. Maybe Beth, would you be willing to participate in a little Wise Crowds? Romano, Trish, yeah. If you are, you can go ahead and turn on your camera, and we'll add you to the spotlight here so that we can actually demonstrate this. And Susan, I can be you can facilitate, and I can be the person who is
The
offering
client. Love that.
the client in this situation.
Fantastic. All
And
right. I'm going to get my clock out so I can actually do this in real life. This is awesome. Welcome, Hermes. You've got about a minute now to describe the challenge that you're having, and Trish, myself, Romano, and Beth will just listen, and I'll give you the hand signal timeout when a minute's up, and then I'll lead us into the next step. Go.
I have been having trouble finding time to exercise, and making sure that I am having the opportunity to really get out of my head every day and to be consistent. I'm someone who really likes to do a lot of different forms of exercise: yoga, walking, swimming, tennis, whatever is works for a particular day because I'm on the move quite a bit. But recently, it's been really difficult to find that time, because there's been a lot of work with partners and clients, uh, and and I think one significant factor to let you know too is that my the place that I'm currently staying is also very small, and it's a hard place to work as well. So I'm often trying to find spaces where I can feel like I'm settled as well in my workspace. So if I had to sum it up into a question, it really is like, how do I? Okay, I'll just stop there. You can make your own question.
Thank you. All right. Now, team, it's our opportunity to ask Hermes some clarifying questions. Remember to phrase it in the form of a question. Try to make it concise because we only have 2 minutes. And Hermes, I'd just like to ask you to keep your answers snappy if you can. And let's see how we go. Let me just set my clock here for 2 minutes and I'll kick us off. Hermes, what's changed when you have had a regular exercise routine? What's been different?
I was in one place for more than 4 weeks at a time.
Team, just feel
That's the
free to
biggest thing.
team, just feel free to unmute and ask your questions.
Yeah, Hermes, this is Beth. Um, do you have a certain amount of time that you think is ideal for you to work your body?
I think the ideal time would be the morning, but I oftentimes have a hard time finding that time. So I have recently set, but actually I haven't recently, it's been in my calendar for a long time to have a 45 minutes set aside in the evening. Um,
Thinking about duration.
20 to 45 minutes.
I'd like to know, Hermes, how exercise is related with your energy.
I know that it gives me a lot of energy, which is why I want to do it. And for whatever reason, I just don't find myself being consistent. I know that for me, it's just about being consistent, making that 15, 20, 30, whatever amount of time each day.
Yeah, and another question for me is, I know you say you're not in one place for more than 4 weeks at a time. What access to facilities do you normally have in these places that you're normally around in?
I definitely have the floor space where I am, and I'm open to using that, and some form of outdoor recreation. So whether it is access to a pool or access to a tennis court, there's some way for me to get outside and do something that's a bit more like fast paced, let's say.
Great. That's perfect timing for our time. So there's two things that we can do now. If we were in real life, I would invite Hermes to literally turn his chair around and not face us. Um, Sometimes in the virtual space, it's just easier to mute your video, turn off your video. So maybe we'll try that, Hermes. So Hermes, I'll invite you now. We are going to be talking about your challenge. Just listen, make some notes, maybe even mute your video so that we can't hear you reacting with that mm-hmm or yes. So team, I'm going to set our timer for about 3 minutes and let's just freestyle it. What advice should we give Hermes?
Yeah, I think
Go ahead.
go for it, Beth. Okay. Yeah, I think a difficult thing is how Hermes is always in different places at different times. But I think what might be interesting is to associate his workout time with some form of community as well. Whether it was joining a club or a gym buddy or whatever it is that works, accountability and social fun.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's great. And especially when you're in a new place, just the opportunity, even if it's going for a walk, to say, I'd love to get to know you better. Can you show me a local park and let's go for a brisk walk through the park and have a conversation. Um, I'm curious, I am a morning exerciser, and for me that works. I'm curious from an energy perspective if another thing that Hermes could try is just to, I hate to say it, get it out of the way the first thing in the morning. Are any of you evening exercisers, and do you have tips about how to fit that in? I don't know, maybe that's one of the keys. Romano, Beth, I see Trish saying no, she's not an evening
Yeah,
exerciser.
I am not an evening exerciser, but for this week, because like Hermes, I also have a lot of things going on in my plate. I'm going to try like a midday boost of energy by exercising. And time is a challenge, definitely. So I've scheduled some video meetings and turned them into audio meetings so I can just like put on my headset and be like, hey, what's up? I'm here, I'm exercising, but we can talk. Tell me what the problem is, and we'll talk
Mm,
about it. So
mm,
I think that's a one way to kind of like squeeze in something while making
yeah.
sure you're still doing what you're supposed to be doing for the day.
One thing I've heard about lately is this thing called exercise snacks. So every hour, set your alarm and set your timer for 3 minutes and do some air squats or push-ups or even jumping jacks. That over the course of the day, that adds up. It's not too sophisticated or sexy, but at least maybe that will actually also give that energy boost.
I like how that's called snacks.
Snacks.
Literally
Hmm.
like snacks.
Hmm.
So
We've got
I'm,
about 20 seconds left. Go, Beth.
yeah, I'm also a morning exerciser, but I also try to move in the evening.
Mm,
The way that I do that is by thinking about it as a digestive. Um, so I think about it in another realm, and then it doesn't really count as exercise. And then the other thought I had for Hermes is to think about the difference between exercise and movement, and to think about which one of those is he really after. Is he after the game and the competition and the social, or is he after moving his body? Which one is it?
exactly. All right, that's our time. Good job, team. Hermes, I'd like to invite you back now. What was that like? What did you experience, and what were your big takeaways?
Was, to be honest, the first impactful thing for me was just feeling held. Really, like having four people simply knowing that they're focusing on something that I presented to them, that and to just hear the ideas that they have, knowing that I don't have to take any of them if I don't want to, but even the fact alone was just fantastic to hear the ideas building across all four people, also four different people who don't interact with each other every day was also fascinating for me, just to see how four people could come together very quickly to work on this idea. In particular, the idea of the snacks thing too. The thing that I reacted to was around. It helped me. Like I love snacking with food in general as well, and so I'm already starting to think like, okay, like if I want to eat less calories too, like can I like try to somehow mentally replace like snacking when I shouldn't be with exercise snacking? And so it's already starting to generate for me also some ideas that that I didn't have. Okay, I say let's end. Or is there another step, Susan?
No, no,
No?
we're done. I just wanted to add that I did truncate some of this. So we can have, normally we'd maybe have 5 minutes for clarifying questions and then 8 minutes to have the conversation. The other form of this that you'll see if you go through the Liberating Structures menu is Troika Consulting. And this is where there's 3 people. So it's a smaller group, but everybody gets a turn to share their challenge. So yeah, I
Absolutely.
love how these are modular and they can shrink and grow as we need.
Well, thank you so much to the volunteers that I volunteered to join us very quickly here. So thank you very much. um, Beth is also going to be joining us tomorrow for our second webinar as well. So please do join us for tomorrow. I'm going to sneak that in there for all of you. But it's really, that was spontaneous. This is sort of
Mhm.
one of the opportunities. Liberating structures can be planned, and you can put them into an agenda and know that everyone is going to be doing it. But also, you can pull them out of your pocket just the way that we did. We got an explanation of it, of course, and to some extent we knew that we were going to share this example, but the whole demonstration showing that you can actually run it pretty quickly is really sort of one of the things that you'll start to gain when you just start to practice these from just the basic full on, like Susan said, the 8 minutes, the 5 minutes, to starting to be like, hey, we can do this in 3 minutes and 2 minutes just to start getting ideas out there. And actually for me, that idea, that exercise snacking idea is stuck in my mind now. So I really want to see what it means to take it forward. This other one that Susan mentioned, Troika, is actually one that I use quite a bit as well. And it does, for its maximum effect, sometimes it's great to have a little bit of planning so that people know what's in the agenda so that they can come with an idea if they'd like to. But I think there are many times where it's also spontaneous, but you do need to know that you have a chunk of time so that each person in the group will be able to have a chance to be consulted and to receive consulting
Mm.
as well. So
Yeah,
there's a trade-off. Yeah,
absolutely.
go ahead.
I think another brilliant thing that we just demonstrated there is, yes, they're great in the business context. They're great for building coherence, for seeing different parts of the system, but also in our everyday lives, right? So that's another kind of added bonus of building your liberating structures repertoire, because it can help us in many facets of our lives. And sometimes I do this with my family, depending on where we are and what we need.
I will point out actually this. Susan asked me to turn off my camera today for this one. I personally, when I facilitate it, I love keeping the camera on and continuing to have that visual of the person being turned around and to have the individual physically turn around too, because it does add this embodied component to it where you are literally moving away and just listening behind you as well. It really focuses the listening aspect, whether you're in person or online. We do have a question here that is about this liberating structure from Adi as well, which is, can you explain, and this is referring to the tips and traps section on the Liberating Structures website, avoid having some participants choosing not to be clients. Everybody has to have at least one challenge. Maybe I'll take a crack at this one first, Susan, and then please jump in with me. I think in this case, again, it kind of depends on the time that you have, how large the group is. What you saw just now was like one group. And now imagine if all 36 of us were doing this together. We would be putting you into a bunch of small groups. So there'd be a lot of different simultaneous conversations. My interpretation of this tip on the Liberating Structures website is give everyone a chance to think about what challenge they might have. And of course, if you have time to be able to go around each group, fantastic. With 40 people and an hour, you're probably not going to have that time. But I think the idea is give everyone a chance to think about what challenge they put into the circle, even if they don't have a chance to be consulted on it at that moment, so that people have that opportunity to at least imagine themselves in that place, even if they're not ready in that moment. Susan, what do you think?
I mean, yeah, I mean, this is everything is an invitation, right? So if somebody really doesn't have something, it's what it is. But what came to my mind is that there's liberating structures that can help support building up to a question even. One of the things that we had thought that we might do instead of wise crowds in this webinar is something called impromptu networking, which I love just as an icebreaker, but I also love a riff on it that we use sometimes, which is allowing people sort of, I don't know, 3 minutes to freestyle on something that they're working on. And then that's in the first round. And then in the second round, it's 1 minute. And in the third round, it's 30 seconds. And almost always the challenge or problem morphs or change or solidifies or clarifies itself. So that's another brilliant thing about liberating structures is that you can stack them depending on what you're seeing in the room and the comfort of people. So that's another thing that I'd recommend.
Adi, this is a great follow-up question. In case we have too many people and too little time, should we select problems or questions first? It's a possibility. Really, I think
Mm.
that depending on the context that you're in, if you're working on a team alignment versus like individual challenges within an organization, um, I think that there are some possibilities to do so. But it's also the possibility that if you have too little time, maybe it's not worth doing. Maybe there's another structure that is more appropriate given the amount of time and to set expectations properly as well around what you can achieve.
Absolutely. And I'll just say another liberating structure that you can use to do that is something called 25-10 crowdsourcing. And the way that this works is you just write down your challenge on a card, like a note card or a post-it note. And then we pass them around, we mill around the room and pass them around. And everybody gets a chance to read the card and then write how if this is a good idea, but not for now, or I'd be really upset if we didn't pick this as one of our topics. One being it's great, but not for now. 5 being absolutely. And you pass the cards around 5 times, and at the end of the 5th time, you've got a sense in the room of where the energy is around the different questions or challenges. So that's another way that you can very quickly, and this takes about, I don't know, 5 minutes max to cycle through. And even as I'm saying this, one thing about liberating structures that's exciting is that it can be really fast and really like energetic and energized and fun. Sometimes that can be overwhelming. So as you start to build your skill and craft in practicing these things, you'll start to notice what is the energy in the room calling for, and to either stretch them out or bring them closer or do some pre-work or let it be spontaneous in the moment. And again, that's one of the beauties that you'll start to be able to sense as you start to practice.
Absolutely. I want to sneak in a quick answer, at least from my perspective, to Patrick's question, which he asked a few minutes ago, which is why is it called liberating structures in the first place? What is it that we're needing to liberate or to be liberated from? Maybe Susan, I'll throw it over to you if you have an answer.
I think well, I haven't asked Henry or Keith this question directly, but I know that in Keith's situation, he has worked in the healthcare and medical sectors for many, many years. And we've all heard the stories of, the surgeon and the nurses in the operating room, and the nurse noticing something, but the hierarchy being so strong that, people's lives can actually be at risk if the conditions aren't created for people to be able to, and I've said this 3 or 4 times now, name what they're seeing. And the liberation from the traditional hierarchy or the hierarchical assumptions that only certain people have either the training, skill, merit, age, or rank to be able to share what they're seeing. This is what these structures liberate us from. I'm going to stick with that. I don't know if it's true or not.
I really like that too, and I think that just from my practice as well, to add on to what Susan said is the idea that like in these structures or without, or not even in necessarily a hierarchical structure, these facilitation tools give a chance for ideas to be liberated or to bring out from our minds, and to allow the space and a variety of spaces to invite people to do so. In maybe a different setting than that they're normally used to, whether or not the organization is highly hierarchical or not.
I'm just going to share my screen here for 1 second, if that's okay. Let me just see if I can do this. There's a huge base to liberating structures in complexity science. And I don't think this is necessarily answers the question about why the word liberating. But I think it's important to know and notice that the gentleman who they didn't create these. It's a repertoire that has been gleaned from many practices, some that have been around many years, but all have these common patterns in their links to complexity science. So if it's important to you to know know about this and where it came from, there's a plethora of information that you can kind of really dig into and understand. Even the microstructures within the liberating structures can be very, very helpful. And because the microstructures are common across all liberating structures, there are currently many, many liberating structures in development, which also you can start to play with, and maybe even, find the inspiration to build your own.
Thanks so much, Susan. I want to make sure that we get maybe at least one more example with a scenario or a use case before uh, we have questions. But please continue to write questions and reactions, partial thoughts that you'd like us to dig a little further into the chat. Um, Tell us, is there a liberating structure that we can use for a situation where maybe a company or an organization or a team or an agency uh, running a lot of initiatives. Like we always have a lot to do. There's new ideas that come in from a lot of different angles, and people just have to start working on them. Like, is there anything that could help us sort of make sense of environments where there's just a lot going on?
Yeah. One of my favorites is something called Ecocycle Planning. And you can use Ecocycle Planning, as I said, for yourself, for the initiatives in your life. We can use these to map the initiatives in our team. And the best thing about Ecocycle Planning to me is we can see where we're getting stuck. So regenerative systems, the ecocycle of life, there's seeds that are in the incubation phase. They might just be ideas that we've been chewing on and mulling on for a long time, but they require investment, time, money, and testing before they can actually be launched. So it's interesting when we work or talk to teams, the way that this works normally, we can draw this on a piece of paper and with Post-it notes, invite people to think about all the initiatives they're working on and then come and post them on the ecocycle where they think they are. Things move normally in this cycle from incubation, so from the seeds to being born when they're little sprouts or seedlets, and then up into maturity where they become like the stalwarts of our business, where we get dependable value for little effort. And then things change, markets change, our interests change, and some things need to be composted so that they can form the rich soil for the next ideas. These little bubbles on the side are really interesting though, and this is mostly where we get stuck. Some organizations, some agencies will have 20 or 30 Post-its here in incubation. They can never seem to get the good ideas to be able to prioritize or find the time or investment to actually test the market or get a product or service ready to go. And when you start to get a lot of things that you're not investing in, we come into this trap called the poverty trap. So that blocks things from being launched or born. But equally, and probably maybe even more problematic, is this thing on the other side called the rigidity trap, where we might have been doing something for 3 or 4 years. If we're honest ourselves, we're getting a little bored. We might be getting a little stale. We might be just doing the same, pulling out the same script time after time. But if we're entrepreneurs, if we're building a business, sometimes things stay in this maturity for too long, and we get afraid of letting them go. And so the encouragement is to bring them into this state here of what we call creative destruction. It's not about just, casting them out and never thinking about them again. It's about anything. It's about anything that lives and dies, right? We need to have the compost. We need to have our old ways of being composting so that we can learn from them and start to build something new. So this is one that I love for teams, organizations, individuals, and it's another really good one for our personal stuff.
This is one that actually comes with almost like a set of material, a framework, and a framework in which people will actually take action and like write post-it notes or take away with them like a worksheet in some cases. Is that right?
That's absolutely right. Right. And more than anything, again, I use the word favorite on liberating structures a lot. You'll have to take that with a pinch of salt. Is that again, they also help us to make the implicit explicit. And so imagine if your team could see for once, okay, no wonder this is happening, right? Patterns start to emerge. And when we bring things from the dark into the light, it gives us options to do something about it. And this is a really good example of being able to do this. Like, we've got 20 things in incubation, we've got 3 things in maturity, and we wonder why we're always rushing around trying to build things. Well, what could this mean? This might mean that the team composition is maybe in another framework I really like is full circle leadership, and maybe Hermes will invite me in to talk about that at one point. But we might have a team just full of visionaries, people that are sensing things, people that love to just think about all the great things. But maybe we don't have too many prototypers. Maybe we don't have too many people who just want to start just even getting a prototype out there so we can start to measure what it's actually doing. We might have very few people in the organization that are operationalizers because, for a long time that has been considered the boring part, but I'll tell you, it's an essential part. And as we start to look at our work in different ways, these novel revelations can just hit us like lightning bolts. And when we as a team have something to look at together that we created, right? So you're coming into a team, me as a facilitator, I don't know what the content that's going to be there is. And so it starts to create a conversation. It starts to create opportunities for meaning making instead of just data. And it overall strengthens, I think it can strengthen the trust of the team. I think it can really, really help us see who's holding more than other people, to be able to support each other and ourselves better. And actually take action straight away. So thanks for that question, Hermes.
So coming into our last few minutes here, so I want to throw it back to this group of people as well. So at this time, I want to make sure that we give you a chance to have that thought to write down a question in the chat, or you're welcome to turn on your camera or not and unmute yourself if you'd like to put a question in. What are your thoughts? Or a reaction? There's what happened, what did you notice? What stood out for you?
I have a teeny tiny question. You mentioned, Susan, about the different let me say, types of people who are in the room. As a facilitator, how would you recognize what would be the signs that you see, or how would you classify people as like, oh, this group of people, I can group them as visionaries. This group of people can be the prototypers. Like, what signs or questions, or how would you know how to group them? Does that
Yeah, I
make
think
sense?
yeah, it does. I think I would probably invite a practice and a process from a friend of mine, Alana Irving, who's written a lot about this practice of full circle leadership. I'll just try to find a couple of links here that can start us going. And it could be, again, as simple as going through the personas for each of these um, um, leadership postures, and basically stand in a circle, or even split a line between the visionaries and the operationalizers, and very quickly in the room you can see what's happening there. Yeah. Just
Maybe in the meantime, Rahman, I'm gonna throw it over to you.
So thank you very much for all this. I remember actually back when I was working with you guys at Insight Pack, seeing this list of tools. I was actually wondering which tools would you recommend, Susan, regarding both internal and external conflict. So a conflict within the organization, and also maybe a conflict with a partner or a client, and what type of tools you would recommend for this particular type of issue.
I mean, I think that it's really different if it's a one-on-one and interpersonal conflict, or if it's a conflict within the broader organization. With a conflict with the broader organization, a liberating structure called "What, So What, Now What" can be really, really impactful. I think that the most discord and dissent I see in organizations is where teams or people are reacting to the same set of data, but making different assumptions and interpretations about the data, and then doing actions based on their interpretation, but maybe not a coherent without having time to actually take that so what meaning making step with a bigger group. And like, for example, about 3 years ago, I've been invited by the board of directors and the CEO of two foundations that were coming together. And all of them were looking at the same set of data. And it was really easy to get the what's out on the table. We were doing this virtually. We were all working in a Google Doc together, so things were coming out, live in person. But it took them about 4 days to actually cohere on the meaning from their very entrenched views of what was going on. And I think that without that, they would have never been able to either realistically or ethically have moved to the next step. So this is one of the cases where sometimes it really benefits to slow down and to make sure that we're understanding the same things. And yeah, that's my little trick is that most conflict, aggravation, frustration, misalignments come when we haven't taken that step to do our meaning making and coherence building.
Okay. Well, I did say that we would get you out of here on time. So I want to make sure that we do wrap up here, but you're always welcome to ask us questions. You have emails from, from Trish and calendar invites. that will be your pathway towards getting answers to any more questions that you have. I think that just to wrap up, I'm also pleased to announce that Susan and I, between Greater Than and Insight Pact, will be launching as well a Liberating Structures cohort-based learning program in the new year. So there's this opportunity, if you want to take this even further, to really learn and dive into the practice, the community of liberating structures. Look out for some communications from us in the next coming days and weeks about that cohort program. And that's going to be for individuals. Of course, if you want to reach out to either Greater Than or Insight Pact about trainings for your teams as well, we're here to grab a coffee virtually or in person if you are wherever any of our team members are. But with that, I do want to say a big thank you to Susan for working with me to put this webinar together, and of course to my team at Insight Pact for making sure that everyone here has gotten the information that they need to arrive. If you did enjoy this webinar, please do let your colleagues and your teams know. We have 3 more in the next couple of days. And we are at 4 o'clock. So with that, I want to say thank you very much for taking the time out of your day to everyone here, and we'll see you in the next few days. Thank you so much, and talk to you all soon.
Thanks, everybody. That was wonderful. See you soon.